This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, can you believe it's already the end of 2020? I know that in some cases this has been the longest, the most challenging, and perhaps even the most tragic year that we've shared in recent memory. It's perhaps one we're all eager to say goodbye to as well. But it also never ceases to amaze me that when we get to this point in any year, how quickly the year seems to have gone by. Getting to this point in any year also makes me always take account of what we've accomplished. And so I wanted to thank you again for listening, subscribing, and reviewing the PR Podcast. We have created a terrific community of public relations and news professionals who are sharing their expertise willingly, week in and week out. We are so grateful to all of you who are making the PR Podcast part of your weekly routine. Please continue to send your feedback and questions because that's what drives the show. We love hearing from you, and we want to incorporate those emails, those comments, and those questions into future episodes. Make sure to connect with us on social media if you haven't already, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we'll get that YouTube channel up and running. We've got another great guest this week, but I have to make a confession. I messed up the recording settings when we taped this. So my side of what you're about to listen to is going to sound like I'm down a hole somewhere. I re-recorded a little bit of this, including this part right here, so it's not completely unlistenable, but the important part of this is that you can hear every word of what our guest is about to say, and she is a terrific one, so let's get right to it. Jessica Bellucci is the founder and president of Bellucci Media, where she manages clients including the incredibly popular TV series Schitt's Creek. Her unflinching honesty, humor, dynamic approach, and steadfast focus provides every client with exceptional service and results. Before she started her own company with her own name on it, and I'm jealous of that, she was the vice president of communications for Tribune Media, where she managed all aspects of public relations, talent, media partnerships, and community outreach for 42 TV stations across the country, Antenna TV, and Tribune's national network in 185 markets. Talk about someone with a lot on their plate. She is a proud New Yorker, an Emmy Award winner, and confesses that she is obsessed with 80s street art, Chanel handbags, crispy bacon, and we'll get into that, and so much TV. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Wow, that's quite an intro. Thanks, Jody.
Well, I stole it from online, so I hope it's all correct.
I wrote it.
We will get to the bacon part eventually, but first, tell us about your work, because it's just on the tip of everyone's tongue these days. Tell us about your work with Schitt's Creek.
Okay, so I can't really take true credit for Schitt's Creek because I do the PR for the show in syndication, which to many is decidedly less sexy, but I promise you it is no less fun. And you know what, I'll actually jump into how I sort of started Bellucci Media. I spent, I guess, almost 15 years working in local television for Tribune, doing the corporate communications for, like you said, 42 television stations, and Antenna TV, which is Tribune's, or now Nextdoor's, retro DigiNet. And the company was sold at the end of last year. And I actually thought that I would take a little bit of time off and, kind of catch my breath after, 15 years at a breakneck pace, and take a vacation and kind of relax. And on my last day out the door, two of the anchors at WPIX here in New York, Tamsin Fidel and Mr. G, the weatherman over there, actually approached me and said, hey, are you gonna, what are you doing next? Are you taking on personal clients? Because you work with these folks for so long, you get very involved in their lives and their personal PR. And I'm not very good at saying no to extra work. So they sort of both approached me separately and said, what are you doing next? Can we hire you? And I said, on one hand, I was really excited because I would be able to continue working with people that I knew and loved. And on the other hand, I was like, oh crap, I really wanted a vacation. So I truly never intended to hang out a shingle, ever. My thought was that, in the end of 2019, when Tribune was sold, that I would just have a handful of clients. Incidentally, Pix ended up keeping me on for a few months, hiring Bellucci Media. And I thought I would just have a few media clients, those that I knew well and loved and had worked with for years, and then kind of look for a job, because I love corporate comms. I love being in-house. I love being part of a gang. I love everything. I love meetings. I love Zoom. I love water cooler. I love everything about our industry, and I love being in the mix. So fast forward, I'm working on a handful of clients, and COVID hits. And it really kind of leveled the playing field in that, because I hated working from home. I'm not cut out for it. I miss people. I miss being out and about. But what I realized was at the beginning of COVID, those of us that were fortunate enough to still be working, it had leveled the playing field, and we were all working from our kitchen tables, and we were all balancing, families and life and crisis and everything else that, came along with being in the midst of a global pandemic. And I kind of realized no one else is in the mix right now. No one else is out and about. There aren't events to be throwing and attending, and there aren't galas and fundraisers. And, I love a conference. I never say no to a conference. There just weren't any. And it sort of made me realize that I can still find a way to be actively involved despite being in the middle of a pandemic and despite there being, essentially no activities. And through that, and through these last, 6, 8, 9 months of COVID, it's really kind of crystallized for me that I am happy doing this, and I like it. And I had promised myself I'd give it a year. And this past September was a year, and I'm going to continue doing this. It's, I think the greatest part for those of us in PR or marketing or any of these industries that rely heavily on networking and connections and contacts, I think the greatest strength that we have is that we are folks that know how to network regardless of the situation. And once I realized that about myself, I said, you know what, I don't need to physically be in person to continue networking and to continue doing my job. And I really sort of realized that I could pivot within this and make it work. And then I've scooped up, a handful of clients over the last year. And to bring it back to Schitt's Creek, that's one of them. And that's been an incredible labor of love, because that show is just a dream to work on. I do the PR for Debmar Mercury, which is the company that syndicates Schitt's Creek, and they are the ones that have brought it to your local broadcast stations. So my involvement in Schitt's Creek is to make sure that people are watching it on your local stations, like Fox 5 here in New York, and not watching it on Netflix, because, like I was saying to you, Jody, earlier, Netflix has really been, a blessing and also a curse for a lot of television shows, in that many people didn't watch shows in first run and they're catching them on Netflix, which helps them find their footing and find a new audience. It also makes the job of doing PR for a show in syndication a little bit harder as well, because people tend to say, I love that show, I'm watching it on Netflix. And I keep correcting them saying, no, but you should be watching it on your local broadcast station in your market XYZ. So, but if you know me well enough, as you certainly do, I'm a pushy pain in the butt anyway. So Schitt's Creek has been terrific to work on, and I've been doing that since the summer. It launched in syndication in every market across the country in September. And it's been really terrific. So fold in the cheese, everybody, fold in the cheese.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I've laughed as hard as like ever, or at least in recent memory, from that scene. And that is the scene that I think that has come to embody the popular vision of that show. I've got to also believe that the shift from Netflix with that show over to local syndication, where I'm going to make a guess here. You correct me if I'm wrong, because I probably will be. It's on once a week, like a regular broadcast show. Mm-hmm. So the dynamic of what's that?
Depends on the market. Some markets air it in strip, where it airs every night at in access at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, depending on the market. Some stack it over the weekends where where you can binge, 6 or 8 episodes over the weekend. So it really
Okay.
depends on the market.
Okay,
For
but
the
in some
most
markets,
part,
it's not gonna be bingeable. And I've got to imagine, this is the point of my question, is that the dynamic of the show, the way people consume it, I think is gonna inherently change. Does that make your job more complicated?
Yes and no. I mean, I think, when you're working with a show in syndication, it's typically, in this instance with Schitt's Creek, it's not a first run show. It had a home on Pop and cable, then it had a home on Netflix, and then obviously now it's in syndication. I think the nice thing is that it exposes people to the show that may not have seen it before, or you stop and watch it. It's like, watching Seinfeld here in New York on Pix. The show's been on for 25 plus years. You've seen every episode 7,000 times, but you stop and watch it.
Absolutely, every time.
Yeah. That's what I fall asleep to every night. Double run of Seinfeld on Pix.
But I'm also picking up on something that you were talking about in your intro there, in terms of loving a conference. And I love a conference too. I love being out with the people. And I think that's been the hardest thing for me in all of this, is that, all those events where we would all run into each other and get to see each other, and sort of, we could also be really efficient with our time, because we could all go to one place, we could all see each other, and then like drift away for another month or so, and then come back and see each other again at the next thing. And that hasn't been there. So much of what you do, and knowing you, I think you and I first met at a conference.
We sure did.
What I call that is sort of relationship PR, right? We engage in building relationships that ultimately yield the product that we're after, whether that's the newspaper head or the TV interview or the whatever that thing is. But that relationship PR, not just pitching straight for coverage, but creating lasting and valuable relationships for your clients with the people who are ultimately going to give them the end result, the press or the whatever else it is that they're going to get. Is that true that you pursue that way? And
100%.
And how do you go about that for your clients?
Look, speaking of clients, every single client I have currently is based on a prior relationship that I've had. It's either come to me through someone I've worked with at some point in my career, or a referral or a recommendation. I actually, I do the PR for the Donna Drake show, which is, airs on WLNY here in New York. She had a client come in to the show as a guest not too long ago. She was the woman that owned a local boutique here in Long Island called Tandy Wear. And she was just lovely. We hit it off when we were talking, and I couldn't help myself. I kept giving her suggestions and ideas, and I kept saying, you should do this and you should do this. And Donna just finally said to Tandy, you should just hire Jessica. Because I always try to be helpful, and I'm probably giving away the store for free more often than not. But so fast forward, Tandy and her store is now a client of mine, and I actually, was with her today, and we ended up getting a piece on News 12, which, as you know, our friend Amy Wollman is the assistant news director over there. We love everybody over there. But I had approached Amy and I had said, look, I want to pitch Tandy. She's expanding, she's expanding her store during a pandemic, which is just unheard of. She's creating a juniors line and doing inclusive sizing so that mothers and daughters can shop, and that, it's for every body type, and blah, 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 blah. And Amy said to me, this is not a news story. You know better than to come to me with this. And she was right. And I sort of, got to know Tandy a little bit, and we were talking, and she told me that both of her children were bullied when they were in high school. And I said, maybe there's a way that we can figure out a partnership with an anti-bullying organization, if that's something that you and your family are passionate about, and let's see. And I reached out to LICAB, which is the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying, and I met the founder, Joe Salamone.
I've worked with Joe as well, with one of my clients. Yep.
Just, a wealth of information, so knowledgeable, so smart, and just a really fantastic human being. And I connected Joe and Tandy, and what they've done is, actually this weekend, all portion of proceeds from all sales in her stores are going to be donated to LICAB. And we went one step further, and we created a postcard that's in all of the dressing rooms and at the registers that's got some LICAB information on it, so that if a young girl's in the dressing room by herself and is being bullied, she can discreetly grab one of these postcards, throw it in her bag. We've got them at the register, so a mom can grab one and throw it in their bag, because I don't have any children, but I can only imagine how hard it is to be a parent in this age of cyber everything. And they've created a nice partnership amongst themselves where they're going to continue to keep anti-bullying materials in the store. And she's going to continue to fundraise for the organization. And, and now I've got, 2 new friends, and we made a nice friendship between the 2 of them. And Tandy is actually going to be volunteering for Joe's organization now. So I think it's all networking. And I think it's, for me, it's, selfishly, I wanted a better news story for my clients. So I sought out an organization that she was comfortable partnering with because it had meaning for her. And I think that's important, not to just throw together a partnership because it would work in the media, but because it's something that hits so close to home for her and her children. And, she said as a mother, she felt helpless. She didn't know what to do, and had these organizations existed when she was a parent, her children might have had a different, a different course. So I think that, I'm always talking to people. What do you do? How can I help you? And I think it's a personality type. I think PR and marketing in the world that, we live in is not right for everyone. When I worked at Tribune, they had a really terrific internship program over there. And in my head, I would always sort of say the shy need not apply to the PR positions, because for entertainment PR, which is what I do, and media PR, you need to have a big personality, and you need to be unscathed by rejection, because you will hear no 99 times, but that one time that you hear yes, that's all you need to kick that door open. Absolutely. So I think it takes a very specific personality type to do what we do. I think, it needs to be an outgoing person, someone that's willing to have the conversations. And you know what? A lot of times in PR, it's having the difficult conversations. No one ever wants to be the one to tell their client that, the answer is no, and here's why. But I think that a good PR person and a good marketer is able to take the no, or when you've got to tell a client no for whatever reason, it's to do it in a way that gets across effectively. And I think that's a real skill too.
I think that is such a great story that you just shared there, especially about Tandy and Joe and LICAB, because I think the majority of the world, I think, is misinformed about what we do. Mm-hmm. And that it's it's press releases, and it's calling up reporters, and it's pitching desks, and it's just getting hits. And sure, that's part of the job, but mm-hmm. so much of it is what you described behind the scenes. In this case, putting 2 people together, yes, to make a better story, but to also effect a partnership mm-hmm. that actually moves the needle for them.
And to bring it full circle,
yeah.
Donna has just booked Joe to talk about LICAB on her January show.
And there's the gift that keeps on giving, right? There you go.
Yep.
And so that's what really gets me excited when I talk to other PR people is not hearing hey, did you see us in XYZ publication this morning? But this project that I'm working on, this thing that I'm doing that is creating something that's brand new. And mm-hmm. and we get to do that and sort of being the creative people that we are, that you and I are, that I know you and I are, is really the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning, is sort of being able to work with anybody, their client or otherwise, getting to work with someone and take them from, where they were to where they can potentially be. And maybe they didn't even know how to get there. Mm-hmm. They knew they wanted to get somewhere near there, but wow, you got me there. Thank you so much. And the thank you, other than the paid invoice, which we need, the thank you is the ultimate reward for us.
Yep. We're storytellers at heart. And I think that, finding the essence of a client's story And again, it may not always be the story that they want to tell. Tandy's a perfect example. She wanted to talk about how she expanded a store during COVID, and the story turned out to be, so much bigger and so much more important.
But it got it in there. You still got it in there.
Right.
That's
But it
the
wasn't
thing. You
the
still
story.
achieved that goal, but right. But as Amy told you, that was not the story.
Right.
And there was actually, you figured out a way to tell a better story, but still get your client's message across, what I call the back door.
Yeah. And I think, I've found that in recent years, a lot of what I'm doing also is, executive thought leadership. And it's, taking your clients and positioning them as experts in their fields, and not only getting them the media coverage or to be able to comment on the particular topic of the day, but to have them more involved in their own industries. I have an ad agency, production house client here in New York called Turbo Dog Productions. They are incredible. They're wildly talented. They've got a young, dynamic owner. And I asked him for his bio. And he's owned this company for, 20 plus years and didn't even have a bio to give me.
Bio, right.
because what, his thought was, why would I need a bio? That's not what I do. But what we've subsequently done is we've bioed up his whole executive team, and we're starting to get them out there kind of on the speaking circuit in their area of expertise. And as conferences, are still happening via Zoom, and then hopefully in 2021, as things start opening back up in real life, I will have positioned this executive team as the leaders in their field, which before they were just, sometimes it's seeing the bigger picture for your client because they're too darn busy doing their jobs. And, sometimes it takes our fresh set of eyes to say, have you ever thought about X, Y, and Z? Or why aren't you doing this? Or explain to me why you do it this way. And I think a lot of the successes that I've had is just simply coming to a client or an industry or a subject matter that I'm not as familiar with, or maybe I'm an expert in it, if it's television or something, but just asking the questions of, what makes this organization tick and how can we synthesize that in such a way that it's interesting to people beyond, those of us on their payroll.
I often say to clients, especially when we're pitching new business, is I don't necessarily need to be an expert in your business. I need to be an expert in my business. Mm-hmm. I'll come to understand your business, and you're going to help educate me. But I need to know how your business is going to fit into the boxes, the media boxes that we want to fit you into. Because every different, and it's not a put down, but every different media outlet has the boxes they need to fill. Whether, and if you think of it, the easiest analogy is a newspaper, right? You get the front of the paper, you got the business section, you got the obituaries, you got the sports page, you got the whatever else. Everything you send them, everything you want them has got to fit into one of those boxes somehow. So we've got to figure out how to translate what the client wants to say into one of those boxes.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes they don't want to hear what you have to say. And I think, figuring out a way to effectively communicate with clients is also a big skill, because a lot of times a client may think I'm cutting the check and I expect X, Y, and Z, but a lot of times there's an education that comes with that says, simply because you think you're worthy of a New York Times cover story does not mean that that's going to happen. We can start to lay the groundwork for that. And we can start to get your name out there so that in time you may be worthy of, press coverage of that caliber. But today, that's probably not going to happen. And that's not because they're not a great company or a great client or you're not doing your job. It's just sometimes the reality of the situation.
Yeah, so true. You talked about it initially a little bit in terms of your skill set, but what skills do you think make a great PR person? What goes into being good at this job?
I think you've got to be unflappable. I think you've got to have a lot of patience because certainly, with PR, we're hand in hand working with the media and things change and stories break and you may, your story may get bumped or the piece may not turn out the way that you had hoped. And I think, being able to navigate is probably the most important skill. Communication, I try to over communicate with everyone in my life. I'm sure my husband wishes I would shut up from time to time. But I think that things go awry when people aren't communicating, whether it's a personal relationship, a professional relationship. I think communication, I mean, that's the obvious one, of course, but, I think being able to work with people, not everyone has that skill. Working with people is a hard skill if you don't love it.
Where it's the end of the year, right? And so we kind of always take this time to look into the crystal ball and see what's coming down the pike. Where do you think that PR and news is going? We see newsrooms that are shrinking, we see reporter jobs that are being cut, and it always pains me being a former newsroom and a former PR person, a former reporter. It always hurts when I see media outlets closing, when I see jobs get lost. And there's this rise, or this challenge, I should say, for media outlets that are struggling because their old revenue models aren't working anymore. So it's this combination of, well, we're not making the money, so we got to cut the people. Then we cut the people, we don't have a great product, and it eats itself. Where do you see traditional news going, or where do you see the news business going?
I think it's twofold. I think when you're talking about specifically news product, as opposed to, talk and news shows, like some of these 9 and 10 o'clock hours of morning newscasts, I think that the trend has been and will continue to be do more with less, with the exception of places where you've got union news shops where those are very clearly defined roles. I think in newsrooms where you're not union, you're finding that a lot of people are shooting their own stories, and there's a rise of an MMJ, multimedia journalist, where they're doing everything themselves. And some of the folks are even editing their own pieces or packages or articles or what have you.
We heard from Roger Clark a couple episodes ago. He says he does that on his iPhone, of all things.
Yeah. And I think technology has made it, incredibly easy to at some point we're doing all newscasts from phones, as we've seen in blackouts and severe weather and tornadoes across the country. The technology is there for all of that. I am also seeing a trend in the rise of sort of a hybrid model of news. Like I was just talking about, some of the newscasts across the country are adding a show that's not specifically news, but it may be an hour or two where they can get paid segments in there. Whereas you would never have a paid segment or a sponsored segment in a traditional newscast, but they're adding some of these news hours or specific carve-outs where they can increase revenue a little bit and work in tandem with their sales departments, because as advertising shifts away from traditional media and it's going to other places, there's a real struggle to kind of keep up with that shift. And I think that a lot of media outlets are being very creative in ways that they share content now. I have one client that is an accessories line called My Shucks, and I am was trying to pitch gift guides and inclusions and things like that. And a lot of the producers and media outlets came back to me and said, well, what's your affiliate link? And I said, I don't know what that means. And there's a rise for product placement in, things as mainstream as Today's Show and whatnot, where in order for them to place your products, they may love it and think it's the greatest gadget ever. But if you don't have an affiliate link where it's, go to suchandsuch.com and check out this product, they're getting a percentage of that sale. And that really surprised me, because I come from a traditional newsroom background where there is a very clear separation of church and state. And so it was very surprising for me in this last year, as I'm getting into different types of PR, to see that so much of what is out there now in the media has a product placement tied to a dollar amount behind it. And that surprised me a lot. maybe it was, just me being naive. But I kind of was feeling like news was the last bastion of that separation of church and state. And they're not doing it in newscasts, but they're adding hours of daytime television or, advertorials and things like that. So that kind of surprised me to see some of these traditional media outlets taking that route. But you know what? I guess if the alternative is closing your doors, you do whatever you can to keep it alive. So, I can't fault them for doing that. It was just something that I found to be very surprising.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's the nature of the business. The sand's constantly shifting below our feet, and I think that's, as PR people, that's another thing that we're doing is we're constantly learning new tricks. There's always something new, and it almost seems like, I was going to ask you about the social media influencers too. It almost seems like social media influencers are old hat, and that there's something new coming around, and it has something to do at the intersection of TikTok and like you said, affiliate links and sort of metrics that can be tracked and dollars that can be scraped from whatever is being talked about. It is just such a fascinating time, and I think that's just it's probably going to grow in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I think especially as budgets shift and companies are strapped for advertising budgets. And I think also another skill, an often overlooked skill that we have as PR people is we've got to be on the forefront of all of the technology. We have to be the, early adapters to everything that's out there, because ultimately our clients will want to be on those platforms and we need to know how they work. So I have found that, having my own agency as opposed to being in-house where there's a technology department and a social media department and real experts. I think when you are on the agency side, or at least for me anyway, being a very small agency, you need to become an expert in technologies and trends that you may not have needed to in the past because there was another arm doing that. So, sort of becoming a technology expert has been something I've been learning over the last year.
We got to live it, right? We got to live it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Let's get into our rapid fire section of the podcast, which I know you've been looking forward to. And we didn't even talk about bacon, but maybe we'll be able to work it in here. So
there you go.
All right, so here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. Favorite news source?
I plead the fifth. I love them all.
Good answer. Favorite social media platform?
Instagram. Currently.
Coffee. Currently. All right, fair enough. Coffee or alcohol?
Neither. Yellow Gatorade.
Ooh, that's a good one. All right, I'll have to hook you up with my daughter. She loves the Gatorade. I think she's a cherry Gatorade girl.
Ooh, that's a good one.
All right, that's a good one. Especially it gives you the red mustache. Favorite on the run food?
Hard to choose. I'm a junk food junkie, but I would say McDonald's French fries.
All right, and then give us the bacon background. We know you're a bacon fan.
I just, I'm a big bacon fan. Several years ago, a friend of mine got me an annual subscription to New Ski's Bacon of the Month Club. And I, have to admit, I've been a subscriber now for many years. So I love it.
All right. We know the way to your heart is through bacon.
That's true,
okay.
Yes.
Got it. All right. Now, and then last rapid fire question. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
I don't have any plans to finish this career. I feel like this is something I can do right until they put me in the grave. I enjoy it, and it's, been able to pay the bills, and I've met some incredible people and helped them do some incredible work. So why stop?
I agree with you. That's where I'm at too. This has been a great conversation, Jessica. Let everybody know where they can find you and Bellucci Media online.
Sure. It's very easy. BellucciMedia.com, and Bellucci Media is also the social handles.
Well, thanks again, Jessica, and thank you everyone for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The PR Podcast, and send us a question or comment. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his terrific photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out as well. We'll see you next time on The PR Podcast.